We have Mr. Jeff Ferguson here. He is running for Orange County Court Judge, and I'd like to welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
First question I want to ask before I find out about you. I know at times that when somebody is running for court, it's like court room number or whatever it might be, or it's a certain area. Is this judge at large, basically, or?
It is. It's a countywide race.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Because I know sometimes it gets down to, they have different divisions and things like that. So welcome, sir. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I understand that you were a deputy district attorney, and you were involved in a major project management. You had quite a background.
Well, I came to Orange County in 1962. I grew up overseas as a kid. My father was in the Navy.
Okay.
And so I traveled with my parents to Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan. But we came here in 62, and I grew up here. I went to UCI, I think, about 3 years after it was built.
Wow.
And graduated from there with a degree in biology and a separate degree in social ecology. And out of school, I was a graphic designer and became a creative director for an advertising group called Imagery.
Okay.
And participated in that business. Then I went to law school. I went here locally. I went to Western State. They had a 2.5-year accelerated program back in the day.
That's up in Costa Mesa, right?
Well, the one I went to is in Fullerton.
Oh, okay, all right.
And they had this 2.5-year accelerated program. I didn't want to be a student, I wanted to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I went through that, and I was hired by the district attorney's office right after I got out of law school. So I've been doing the job for 31 years this past February. So I can't retire, I have a 13-year-old, so
yeah.
I have to keep going.
I know about that. You want to talk a little bit about your concerns for the rights of the crime victims and failure of the courts to generally follow Marsy's Law. What is Marsy's Law?
Well, first let me say that I am very concerned about crime victims' rights because having seen it for 30 years, having handled cases that have a lot of victims. And defendants have tremendous number of both constitutional and civil rights to ensure fairness and due process, which they must have, there's no doubt about that. But for decades, victims have been sort of seen insult to injury when they participate in the system. Under the best circumstances, the justice system has been kind of indifferent to the plight of victims and their families, expecting them to show up at court on demand, making them sit there, not really explaining the process, and having a variety of other things. At worst, they're treated with disdain. Marsy's Law was an attempt several years ago to place into the California Constitution a series of rights or a collection of obligations that the court system and the district attorney's office and so forth have to victims to try to make their experience more fair and more equal dealing with the system. Not to give them rights against defendants, but to give them rights within the system. So Marsy's Law, for example, one of the rights that Marsy's Law guarantees to victims is the right to step forward in open court and share with the judge and anyone else who happens to be there to listen, including the defendant and the prosecutor, their feelings about their victimization. What happened to them? How did it impact their lives? How did it impact the lives of their families? And they have a right to do that. And the point of that is to convey to the judge enough information, genuine information that the judge can take and integrate into his or her decision on sentencing.
Okay.
Right? Now the problem is we have too many cases in this county and in this state to go to trial. That means 95% of all these cases have to plead guilty. They have to be resolved in some fashion to go to trial. The only time, in the real world, the only time a victim is really invited to step forward into that open court area and talk with the judge in front of everybody or their families is when they're ready to plead guilty. In other words, when that is ready to, the case is ending. There is not a defense attorney in this county or this state who would ever plead their client to any crime without knowing in advance what is going to happen to them, what the sentence will be. So what I'm saying is, by the time the victim is invited to show up in court and stand there at the podium and tell the judge what they feel, the decision on sentencing has already been made. The prosecutor, the defense lawyer, and often the judge, they have already come to an agreement among themselves as to what the sentence is going to be, whether it's probation or prison or something in between, And when the victim stands up and speaks, it's a show.
Right.
Realistically, it's a show to make the victim feel better. The problem is that isn't what was intended by the law. The law was to give the victim a chance, a genuine chance, to share with the court information so the court can make a reasoned decision. So that's one of the things I'm concerned about. And I think it's relatively easy. If the court comes to discover that the parties want to resolve the case, a judge can say, well, let's set this, a couple of weeks away, and Mr. Prosecutor, get a hold of the victim. I'd like to hear what the victim says before we all come to a conclusion.
Exactly.
Realistically, that's not how it works.
Okay, but it should,
I think it should.
Criminal justice realignment, and you want to talk about how it is failing and why it's failing.
Well, the criminal justice realignment, which we also know as AB 109, of course, was designed to remove people from custody, get them out of custody, particularly in the state prisons. And right now, my job was Tony Rakakis assigned me and another very senior deputy DA to manage handling the parole issues, which are the last shoe to drop, which happened July of the last year. And these people, parolees, are serious and violent felons. So they're a very special class and group of people. Now, the problem is that the overall concept for AB 109 was, let's get these people out of custody because they're not getting the mental health care and the drug rehabilitation care and so forth in the prisons. So let's get them out of custody, and once they're out of custody, then we will provide that for them. We'll give them mental health care, and we will give them drug rehabilitation in a different setting. The problem is there's no money for it.
Right.
So what's happening is a lot of these criminals are getting out early, which was by design, but they're not getting any of the supposed treatment paradigms that's supposed to help them not reoffend.
Right.
So one of the reasons that it is failing, because these people are being returned to the street much sooner than ever before. They are not getting any kind of treatment or mental health care or drug rehabilitation. So they get out early, and yet they commit crimes right away.
Right.
In the parolee area, for example, since we started this in July, right, it's been, now we're coming in June, so it's been about a year. I'm seeing parolees 5 and 6 times back already.
Right.
And they've been violating and violating and violating. And of course, many of them are committing new crimes as well. So it has failed because the entire scope of what the law was supposed to do has not been working.
And, this kind of plays into the other question, the role of the judge in our governance, because basically this came down from a much higher court saying the state had to look into this and do this. What is your view on that as far as the role of a judge in the governance of whether, obviously in this case would be the county?
Sure. Well, I think the judiciary has a role, and then judges have a role. And in the broadest sense, I mean, the role of the judiciary is as a third part of the government. Right. But it's not a representative part of the government. In other words, a judge's role is not to represent a group of people. That's right. Despite the size of the group or whatever, or their attitudes or their philosophies. The role of the judge is to represent the law and represent fairness. And on a grand scale, the role of the judiciary is to sort of contain and balance the power that the legislative branch and the executive branch have. When you shrink that down to a courtroom at the smallest local level, one of the functions of the judge is to ensure that there is due process and fairness in every single proceeding. And it's not just the promise of that, it's the fulfillment of that. And what that does fundamentally is, of course, it gives everyone a fair shake. But what it does from a governance standpoint is it reassures people. It reassures every citizen, reassures the population that they do have a place to go when they feel wronged. Right. And a fair place to go when they feel wronged. And that includes by the government, by other people, that includes by criminals or by police officers. And that reassurance is what makes our system work. And so if that doesn't work, if that breaks down, then we're going to have a crisis of confidence. And if people don't believe they can come to court for redress and that it's fair and they have a shot, and in fact, if they don't get that shot, then the whole system, I think, is going to stumble. All right. AB 109 works into this because with these criminals coming out, what people are seeing is our cities are seeing spikes in property crimes. What people are seeing is what's going on. Right. Where is the penalty for being a criminal? And at the same time, the help that these people could be getting or should be getting as part of this law isn't happening. So I think it's starting to build this lack of trust for the judiciary in managing our daily lives from the standpoint of handling these issues.
All right, we're out of time here, but I want to mention that Jeff Ferguson's website is fergusonforjudge.org, right?
Right.
So you can go there and find out information. You know, the primary is coming up on June 3rd, and most of the ballots are out there, or the preliminary ones, I should say. If you're a vote by mail, you may already have yours. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Good luck to you.
Nice meeting.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment.